everyone. This is DRINKS presents Wine Online 101, a 10-part series for wineries to tackle an entirely new approach to expanding their businesses online. I'm Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Electriq, a retention as a service e-commerce agency. And today we're going to unpack how to create a strong customer experience using Klaviyo. I'm joined by Tyler Prete, strategic partnerships from Klaviyo. And so thank you so much for doing this, Tyler. I'm really excited to dive into this with you.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me, Brandon. This is awesome.
So before we jump in here, can you just give everybody a quick little background on yourself, and then we'll dive into the topic?
Totally, yeah. So I joined Klaviyo at January of this year to handle some strategic partnerships. The way we view partnerships at Klaviyo is actually really awesome. We group agencies and service partners together, technologies together, and then the atypical partnerships types, which we call strategic here. So a lot fits into that bucket, like alcohol. Prior to Klaviyo, I did a lot of work at Shopify as well, both on the sales side as well as strategic partnerships as well. So a little bit newer to Klaviyo still, but definitely have the e-commerce experience and context so far.
Sounds like a jack of all trades with partnerships based off of the broad description of strategic.
That's exactly it. We put a buzzy title, but like the Swiss Army knife team, I think is how we refer to it.
That's awesome. So let's start with some of the issues that brands are facing with focusing only on acquisition as a sales strategy, because we see this across the board with a lot of our clients. There was such a reliance on like just getting more and more people to make those first purchases, and then whatever happened after that just sort of happened. But why is that broken? And what are some of the things that Klaviyo is doing to help wineries specifically be able to focus more on the retention side than just on acquisition?
Yeah, I'll take that in a couple different ways, and hopefully they're like atypical ways. Like everyone goes down the whole, decreased ROI and social and yada, yada, yada. I think what was interesting to note over the last couple of years was how cheap capital was, right? And so you could raise, whether it was debt or equity really easily, and you could deploy that across social and go to that top of funnel like really, really fast. Wineries are no exception, right? COVID was great for the alcohol industry. I don't know about you, but my alcohol consumption went way up. Inadvertently, I became some second-class sommelier type of person.
I started running and outside and cycling, but at the same time drinking more. So I think the two offset each other.
Yeah, you're net neutral still. But wineries were different, right? Like you take wineries, which have historically been, I don't want to say dependent, but heavily focused on their retail locations for wine tastings or direct pickups. You add an element like COVID in the mix, you add very cheap capital and a lot of playbooks in marketing, specifically about growing top of funnel on social. A lot of wineries tended to over-index or over-rotate on social out of the gates, right? There's also a lot of complexity with setting up wineries, as I'm sure you know, online. So they kind of had a difficult scenario. Klaviyo is focused on that owned audience, right? That owned audience that could have been gathered by your POS location. It could have been gathered via your online store or any other touch point you have. Fact of the matter is your ROI on owned customers is significantly higher than those top of funnel users. So that's where we want to see people shift their attention. Definitely still continue to grow that top of funnel, but as capital gets more expensive, as consumers start purchasing more in store again, we really want to make sure we're being mindful of those owned audiences. And at Klaviyo, what we do that is, you ingest as much data as possible. You can touch them on email, SMS, push, and keep those touch points hyper relevant. That's kind of how we view the space. Wineries specifically, it's new to them, right? There has not been a solution in the space where you can say, I own my own winery and I'm easily going to go online and sell. Klaviyo hopes to play in that space alongside Drinks, where we can make it easier, ingest that data, and then allow them to communicate to their customers exactly like any other brand should.
And that's why I'm so excited to see all of these wineries start to make the transition to what I would say are best in class e-commerce platforms like a Shopify versus some of the older, say more legacy tech that they've been reliant on that was built specifically just for wineries, because you don't have any of the platform benefits that you get with a Shopify ecosystem that has 6,000 apps and like 100 Shopify Plus certified apps. So as a winery, and we've been working with a few now, they want to use Klaviyo, but everything's custom. Like all the metrics, all the API integrations, which wineries don't want to be dealing with that. First of all, you're it's an industry that isn't filled with like technical resources to begin with. And second, any brand should be empowered to just be able to like get up and running with a relatively sophisticated retention strategy. And so the ability to just plug and play with the Shopify and Klaviyo is unmatched with anything else. So I'm really excited to start to see more and more of that come to fruition.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think even Brandon, to take that one step further, the Shopify ecosystem, I think, gives people choice, right? Which I think wineries missed out on for a really long time. If you look at D2C brands, right, they view their technologies as like moats or competitive advantages. If you're using something like, a recharge for subscription or a rebuy for cross-sell, upsell, and your competitors are not taking full advantage of that, that's a moat that you just created. So to your point, 6,000 apps in the Shopify ecosystem, like, congratulations, you now have choice. It's up to us to make it pretty easy to make that choice for the right apps, but we're going to see a lot of really cool things soon.
Yeah, and so many times I've heard from wineries like all these really interesting and creative marketing ideas that they have, but their hands are completely tied because they can't enable any of them. So it's not like the ideas aren't there, they're just not being enabled by their technology solutions. So even in the conversations that we've had, like there's so many things I can just sort of point them in the right direction, like, oh, go use this or go use that, because it's already out of the box, plug and play.
Yeah, totally.
And a lot of it is around really, I think, product education, because something that maybe historically, especially on the winery side, if you aren't really well versed in direct consumer or it hasn't been a priority, you're not really measuring things like customer lifetime value. So I guess for everybody listening, what is customer lifetime value and why is it important? And then what does Klaviyo enable and allow you to do with that data?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think customer lifetime value, the name says just as much as it should say. We're really focused on how much value can you get from a singular customer. Obviously, the more value you get from a customer, it allows you to amortize that acquisition cost over a longer period and ultimately get more profitable purchases down the line since you've already acquired them. I think when it comes to wineries specifically, I view like wine as reliant on two things, right? It's like they're really reliant on an experience typically, and they're really reliant on a story to sell the wine, right? It's kind of hard for the average person like one of us to say, oh yeah, this Pinot Noir has such and such characteristics, but I bet you either of us could tell the story about a wine that we tried. And so when we start giving brands the ability to communicate that story, right, and incur those second, third, fourth, fifth purchases, increasing that customer lifetime value, and then hitting them with unique touch points along that buyer journey as well, we create kind of like a digital experience while also increasing that customer lifetime value, ultimately just making customers more profitable for the wineries themselves. Klaviyo allows you to track this by a number of different ways. I mean, we ingest point of first purchase and even points prior to the first purchase, like abandoned carts or products that they viewed. But once they purchase, we'll ingest all of that data going forward. We'll also allow you to report on that data and say, like, look, what is the value of this customer? We can take that one step further and build segments, right, based off these customer lifetime values. Let's just say I'm an avid purchaser from a winery, and maybe you've never purchased before. The concept of introducing VIP tiers based on customer lifetime value, I think, is really attractive for wineries, where we can say, look, Tyler's a regular purchaser. Let's take it one step further and say, maybe Tyler's even a subscriber to our wine club, right? There's no way that we should be receiving the same communication because they know I've invested, I'm bought in on the story. I love the experience. And so now it's about making it easier for me to just spend more with the brand. For you, you might still be on discovery, but you can identify that again by the customer lifetime value. If you have got a low CLV, you probably want to drive them a little bit deeper in the funnel using specific segments within Klaviyo, maybe bronze or silver tiers with specific flows allocated to those tiers. If you're gold members with high CLV, let's make conversions easy. Let's make those communications hyper relevant. And let's actually turn them into advocates as well, giving them things like the option to share the story or invite their friends. we can get more specific on the funnels based on CLV. I'm assuming deeper or even some follow-up collateral, but that's the way I like to think of it for wineries specifically.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to tell story through email and text and really just online in general than it is through retail. I mean, with retail, you're limited to maybe you have like an end cap at best, but most likely you're one of 1,000 bottles on the shelf, and consumers are just looking at the label, and that's how they're really deciding. I can't remember what the statistic is, but I think it's like 90% of wine purchases are just based off of the label. So I try to be like a wine snob and look at the back of the label and say that that's how I make my purchases. But much easier to showcase that storytelling online. And that's the differentiation between the 11,000 wineries in the US. Like they all do something different. There's some sort of unique background. Maybe it's like 5 generations of family members have been in the winemaking industry. Maybe it's the terroir. Maybe it's the way that they bottle it. Maybe it's the way that they store it. There's so many different things that go into it, but you can't really get that when it's just a commoditized product on a shelf in a store. And when it comes to like segmentation, I think lifetime value is just one of 1,000 different ways that a winery could segment their customer database. Like, are you a red drinker? Are you white? Are you rosé? What's your purchasing frequency? I really like to use the expected like next reorder date in Klaviyo to trigger replenishment flows. So we know like, oh, Brandon orders a 12 pack of wine every 6 months versus, I don't know, Ashley orders a 6 pack every 3 months. Having that data and tailoring the communications to be effective for that consumer is really powerful.
Absolutely. And I think we'll see brands get even more specific with those segments as we start democratizing the industry, right? I think we'll start seeing more flows dependent on location, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm within a 30-mile proximity of a winery, 100% get me to tasting events, right? Or if you've got a sister winery or brother winery, get me to those. If you've got preferred restaurants that you know or you're doing a collaboration with and you're serving your vintage wines at night, get me there, right? So I think we're going to see wineries actually really push new segments on Klaviyo, which is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I was talking the other day to a winery about how we can sort of target everybody within the 30-mile radius of a store that they're doing an activation in. We can send them a text out of Klaviyo so that we can actually push retail traffic through our online channel. Because historically, I think some brands in general, but specifically wineries, have thought like an either or approach, like it's either retail or it's online, but really the two are complementary. And I think that's a great example of how. And Shopify POS and ecom, like combining those two together, because Klaviyo is connected to both. Like it's not a winery, but when I shop from Marine Layer, which uses Klaviyo and Shopify, they've got the POS and they've got online. I can't tell you how much better of an experience is that I can like go to the store, which in the case of the winery would be the tasting room, which is a huge source of new customer acquisition for them, something that a lot of brands don't have. You go to the store and all of your online orders are there. You can easily like process returns. Like the customer experience is just really solid. Your loyalty points are accruing across both. You're not dealing with some of these larger legacy brands or wineries where they're disconnected and they don't talk to one another. So you sort of have to choose either or. That's really powerful. And Klaviyo can enable you to know like, oh, this person just shopped in store versus this person just bought online.
Absolutely. And all these conversations we're keeping is like, you know, the core technologies like the Shopify, Drinks, Klaviyos. But once we start adding on more technologies, these segments become more and more valuable, right? Like how awesome would it be if it's like, I come to the wine, the winery, and they know my preference. They know that I'm on a wine subscription. They ask me right there if I want to take the bottle in person or if they'd rather me ship it to them next week on my wine subscription. And the next. It's such a good experience. So I'm really excited to see what we do together. Needless to say.
I have an example somewhere. Where it's like a very basic segment. Like I think it's maybe like ordered one time or more, and then I just showcase like how it could get like another filter attached to it. So like this is what it looks like as a second level, then third, all the way down to like the 14th level where it's like 14 different criteria that creates this really hyper targeted segment. But you can take that either a million different directions, and with plugging in all the other Shopify apps you'll be using into Klaviyo, you then have all that data. So like, what are the reviews that have been left? Are they 5-star or 1-star? What's the loyalty program metrics? What is like basically anything that you are using on Shopify? Klaviyo is that central data repository to create that segmentation.
Exactly.
What are some of the common missed opportunities that you see right now that wineries could take advantage of?
I mean, I think we hit on a number of them earlier, right? Which is like understanding who your customer is and what their preferences are. We view Klaviyo, at least, excuse me, at least in the winery region, as a retention tool, right? I think I want to also make sure we're viewing Klaviyo as, to your point, a customer data platform, right? I don't want wineries just using Klaviyo for abandoned cart flows, right? Or I don't want wineries using Klaviyo for post-purchase flows. I want them using Klaviyo to deliver that story, or I want them using Klaviyo to create a VIP experience for their end consumers. I want them identifying what their customers' preferences are and then making segments for those. To your point way earlier, right? Like, this industry is not rich with tech people, right? It's up to teams like ours to go into that industry and say like, hey, look, these are ideas that you probably have and that you didn't think was possible. This is how easy it is to do it. I think once we get in there, like, they're naturally going to be telling us these ideas of like, oh, well, we want to do this. And they don't realize how easy it is. So again, none of these ideas are new to them. There's stuff they're doing in person in their wineries already. I'd just love to see them do it online with tools like Klaviyo.
Yeah, and I think at its core, like, Klaviyo is a customer data platform. It just happens to do email, text, and push. There's a million other applications that could come out of that. And I think that's the biggest differentiator, because there's 1,000 like email tools, and there's going to be 1,000 more that come up, but they don't have the data. And so you can't do anything. You're not empowered to create these personalized experiences, and you don't have these robust integrations with the rest of the ecosystem. I think that is really the bread and butter of Klaviyo. And I find it fascinating. Like, I want to, who decided that was going to be what, like, you went all in on? Because I feel like not a lot of other companies, at least historically, have been so invested in tech integrations.
Yeah, honestly, I wish I knew the answer. I think we can give blanket credit to AAB and the team, but at least as I understand the inception of Klaviyo, right, which is important to note, is we were made first and foremost to be that customer data platform. But when we were first created, like, how brands use data was email or build lookalike audiences against, or, you know, even that was actually maybe a little bit of a stretch. It was predominantly email. So it's easy to say, look, we'll make the CDP, the customer data platform layer, that ingests data, but we'll use it to power an experience. And then SMS emerges, right? We still have that very strong CDP layer, but with significantly more integrations, right? We'll power that SMS. And so I think you'll see Klaviyo investing in a couple different ways. If I was at the helm here, would be, you know, let's add on more functions to capitalize on that data we have and increase touches. So, you know, maybe it's push, or maybe it's deeper integrations with other platforms. And then we'll also invest in our data ingestion layer. So more integrations with technologies, better integrations with technologies. Maybe it's more advanced reporting capabilities, things like that. I know you know this probably just as much as I do, given you're one of our elite partners, but it's nice to jam on the direction of things like this.
I think direct mail would be cool. Like, if I could drag in the direct mail communication into my Klaviyo flow.
Yep.
And I think that's why Klaviyo is going to be that centralized hub for all communications. Like, I'm a strong believer in taking a best-in-class approach to technology, which is why we have like one partner for reviews, one partner for quizzes, one partner for subscriptions. But I don't think it's going to be that way for like customer communication, because if you're sending email, SMS, push, direct mail, all these things out of separate platforms, you could be hitting somebody who just purchased as a customer like 1,000 different ways with no real strategy. And even to do so, which we attempt to do right now, you have to be very, very, very specific with like when somebody receives it with a time delay, or what is your exit filter for that flow. It's just not giving you a strong ability to create those experiences. And then reporting is a nightmare, because then you have all 4 tools telling you that they just drove all 150% of your online revenue. Like, I think if I took the attributed revenue from all the apps our clients use, they'd be making like 15 times X what their Shopify revenue is. It's
Exactly.
crazy.
That's where it gets so messy. And I think like brands like winery brands, right, are going to use those things like direct mail. They're going to push us to do that stuff. I mean, we've got a couple of merchants like Midday Squares is a great customer, right, where they will flow for first-time purchasers. And they actually have their mom taking a picture of them on a Polaroid, and they will handwrite a letter for every first-time purchaser. I normally have it on my desk. I actually just moved my desk today and cleaned it off. But it's awesome to see like that is exactly what they do. If we could take it one step further to your point and like programmatify it, maybe we integrate with someone that actually will just write the letters, right? Now we can actually come a ton of scale in a singular flow.
Yeah, and that's why I buy directly from some of the wineries, specifically some like Napa clubs that I'm a part of. You can get the wine from wine.com or whatever, some other online retailer, or even go in store, but you're not getting the letters from the founder. You're not getting the print collateral they could send to you. You don't get the really cool map of the terroir and where they have the different plots, and you're not getting that true experience. It doesn't feel as connected. So big differentiation factor for wineries for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think we've covered a lot here. Is there anything else that you would say as like a parting takeaway, or anything else you want to touch on for wineries as it relates to Klaviyo or otherwise?
I think if there's a parting takeaway, it's that there are a lot of companies focused on enabling wineries to succeed in this new environment, right? Drinks is one, Shopify is another, Klaviyo is another, Recharge is another. We're all really, really invested in this industry because we realize that the status quo is just not good enough, right? And so I want wineries, if they're starting to like think of how do we accomplish, better distribution across the US, or better marketing to our owned audiences, or even how do we start and create this from scratch? Like, I want them to know that our companies are heavily invested in this vertical and to reach out to actually explore this with us. Because we're not experts in it yet. Drinks is probably the biggest expert in the room here, but together we can all actually come up with a really solid solution for these wineries. Because, if nothing else, like, we're consumers of this product as well. I would love nothing more than to have a great experience as a consumer. And if Klaviyo wins in the process, that's awesome too.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a triangle, because you have Drinks, who has the alcohol industry expertise. Then you have Klaviyo and Shopify and Recharge. You have best in class marketing technology. And then you have Electriq as like a Klaviyo elite, Shopify Plus certified partner, who's an expert in enabling the marketing tech. So by combining those three, you basically have this like supercharged growth engine for wineries to be able to sell direct to consumer. It is going to be really fun to start to work with some of these brands and get things rolling.
Absolutely.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Again, in this session, we dove into Klaviyo specifically and how we can help solve really not only acquisition problems, but how to focus on creating customer experiences and relationships through the power of taking your customer data to segment and personalize communications. And there's so many different applications that we could dive into. So if you're curious about how to set this up or want to get introduced to partners like Tyler, email us at wineries@drinks.com for a meeting. We'll get it set up. We'll dive in. As you can tell, we love to talk about this stuff. And so thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we'll see you next time.